Michael Anderson stood in the doorway of his newly purchased house, cardboard box balanced precariously in his arms, and stared at the woman sitting on his couch. She had silvery white hair that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and her skin had a faint bluish tinge that he initially attributed to the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. She was calmly reading a book as if she belonged there. "Excuse me," he managed to say, his voice surprisingly steady despite his racing heart, "but who are you and what are you doing in my house?" The woman looked up, revealing eyes that were definitely not human. They were entirely silver, with no visible pupils or irises. "Ah, you must be the new owner," she said in perfect English, though her voice carried an odd melodic quality. "I'm Valara. I suppose we should discuss the current living arrangement." Michael set down his box with deliberate care, buying himself a moment to process this surreal situation. He'd checked the house thoroughly before closing the deal, and his real estate agent had assured him it was vacant. Yet here was this person, acting as if her presence was the most natural thing in the world. "Living arrangement," he echoed. "There is no living arrangement. I bought this house. I have the paperwork. You need to leave before I call the police." Valara tilted her head in a distinctly inhuman manner. "That would be inadvisable. Your local law enforcement agencies would find my presence rather complicated to handle." She stood up, and Michael noticed she moved with an uncanny grace, as if gravity affected her slightly differently. "Perhaps we should start over. I am a cultural anthropologist from the Centauri system, and this house has been my observation post for the past 3 years." Michael's hand instinctively reached for his phone, but he hesitated. Either this woman was dangerously delusional, or... He glanced around his living room, noting details he hadn't seen before, strange geometric patterns etched into the crown molding, a faint humming coming from what he'd assumed was the heating system, and what looked like normal houseplants that, on closer inspection, seemed to be moving slightly despite the lack of any breeze. "You're telling me you're an alien?" he asked, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. His software engineer's mind was already cataloging the evidence, trying to make sense of the impossible situation before him. "That would be your term for it, yes." Valara gestured to the couch. "Would you like to sit down? I find humans process shocking information better when seated. I can also make you some tea, though I should warn you, I've modified the kitchen somewhat to accommodate my dietary needs." Michael walked to the couch on unsteady legs and sat down. The reality of his situation was slowly sinking in. He'd just spent his life savings on a house that came with an alien roommate. His mother had always warned him to read the fine print on contracts, but somehow he doubted even the most thorough inspection would have caught this. "Modified the kitchen?" he asked weakly. "Oh yes," Valara said, her silver eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I've installed several quantum field generators in the microwave. They're quite useful for preparing both human and Centaurian cuisine. Would you like a demonstration?" Before Michael could respond, a high-pitched beeping sound emanated from what he'd thought was a decorative wall sculpture. Valara's expression shifted to one of concern. "Ah," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation after I deal with the temporal anomaly in your garage. Don't worry, it's probably just a minor spacetime fluctuation. Though you might want to avoid going in there for the next few hours." The first week of living with an alien was exactly as bizarre as Michael had expected. After Valara had contained what she called a minor temporal disturbance in the garage, which had left his toolbox aging backwards until it turned into raw ore, they'd sat down to establish some ground rules. "I understand this is your house now," Valara had said, creating a holographic document that floated between them. "But my research is vital to understanding human civilization's development. I'm willing to compensate you for the inconvenience." Michael rubbed his temples, still struggling to process his new reality. "And how exactly would you compensate me? I don't think you have Earth currency." Valara's silver eyes sparkled with amusement. "No, but I can upgrade your home systems. Your primitive electrical grid is quite inefficient. I could also enhance your internet connection. You haven't experienced true streaming quality until you've tried quantum entangled data transmission. And so began their unusual arrangement. Michael continued his remote work as a software engineer, while Vilara conducted her anthropological research. She kept her more exotic equipment confined to the basement, which now housed what she called a modest laboratory setup that occasionally caused localized gravity fluctuations. The cultural misunderstandings were endless. Michael walked in one morning to find Vilara had reorganized his kitchen according to what she called harmonic resonance patterns. The alignment of your cooking implements was creating destructive energy waves, she explained, gesturing to his spatulas, which now hung from the ceiling in a complex geometric pattern. This arrangement will make your food taste 47% better. Surprisingly, she was right. His scrambled eggs had never been more delicious. There were challenges, of course. Vilara's tendency to conduct experiments at 3 in the morning, accompanied by sounds that defied physics, tested Michael's patience. And her habit of walking through walls instead of using doors, why maintain such rigid definitions of space, nearly gave him a heart attack more than once. But there were fascinating moments too. She helped him understand coding problems by explaining them in 5-dimensional terms. His debugging time had dropped significantly, even if he had to translate her solutions back into regular 3-dimensional logic. One evening, as they shared a meal, his pasta carbonara and her glowing blue nutrient crystals, Vilara spoke about her home. The Centauri system is beautiful, but very different from Earth. We built our cities in the upper atmosphere, dancing among the aurora. My research station here feels heavy in comparison. Michael watched as she absent-mindedly levitated her fork. Why Earth? Why study us? Your species is at a crucial junction, she said, her expression turning serious. The next few decades will determine whether you join the greater galactic community or... She paused, choosing her words carefully, remain isolated for your own protection. Before Michael could press for details, all the lights in the house flickered. Vilara's posture stiffened. That's not supposed to happen, she said, rising from her chair. My shielding should prevent any power fluctuations. She walked to the window, her silver hair glowing brighter with concern. A black van was parked across the street, its windows tinted. As they watched, another identical vehicle pulled up beside it. Michael, Vilara said quietly, I believe we may have a problem. The black vans remained stationed outside for 3 days. Michael called in sick to work, not daring to leave the house. Vilara had transformed his basement into what she called a minimal security setup, though the shifting walls and floating orbs of energy made it look more like a sci-fi movie set. They're from a covert division of your government, Vilara explained while monitoring multiple holographic screens. One that officially doesn't exist. They've detected traces of my technology despite my best efforts at containment. Michael paced nervously between the pulsing energy columns. How? You said your shielding was perfect. It was, she frowned, her silver hair dimming with concern. Until the temporal incident in your garage. It created a brief signature that their quantum detection grid picked up. She manipulated some floating symbols. They're not the only ones looking for me now. What do you mean? Vilara's expression darkened. There are others of my kind who disagree with our policy of non-interference with developing worlds. They believe Earth should be guided more directly. She turned to face him. Controlled, to be precise. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. And they know you're here? The same energy spike that attracted your government's attention would have been visible to them as well. She gestured, and a 3-dimensional map of the neighborhood appeared. Red dots blinked ominously at various points. They're closing in. The humans in those vans are the least of our concerns. As if on cue, the basement's lights flickered, and a low hum vibrated through the foundation. Vilara's eyes widened. "They're scanning the house," she whispered. "More thoroughly than Earth technology should be capable of." She looked at Michael. "Someone's helping them." Michael watched as she rapidly reconfigured her equipment, her movements becoming more urgent. "What can I do?" "You should leave," she said without looking up. "This isn't your fight. I can create a temporal displacement field that will let you walk out undetected. Start fresh somewhere else." He thought about it. He could walk away, let this become someone else's problem. His insurance would probably cover a mysterious house destruction. But then he remembered how Vilara had spent an entire weekend helping him debug a crucial project, how she'd actually made his humble home feel more alive with her strange presence and endless curiosity about human life. "No," he said firmly. "This is my house too. And you're the most interesting roommate I've ever had. What's the plan?" Vilara's hair brightened slightly, though her expression remained serious. "We need to reach my emergency beacon in the attic. If I can activate it, my research team can extract us." But, she stopped as a new alert flashed across her screens. The basement door slammed shut on its own, and the air grew thick with electrical charge. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere spoke in a language Michael didn't understand, but the mechanical undertone made it sound like a threat. Vilara grabbed his arm. "The others are here. Your government's forces were just a distraction." She pressed a small crystal into his hand. "If anything happens to me, get this to the attic beacon. It contains my research data, proving Earth deserves its independence." Before Michael could respond, the basement walls began to ripple like liquid metal. Vilara pushed him behind her as a figure stepped through the solid concrete, an alien that looked similar to her, but with black hair that moved like smoke and eyes that glowed red. "Hello, little sister," the figure said in that same mechanical tone. "The council would like to speak with you about your unauthorized observations." The basement had become a battlefield of light and shadow. Vilara's sister, who she'd hastily identified as Nixus, a council enforcer, stood unwavering as tendrils of darkness writhed around her like living smoke. "Your experiment ends now," Nixus declared. "The humans have proven themselves too volatile. The council has voted for direct intervention." Michael clutched the crystal Vilara had given him, its warmth pulsing against his palm. He watched as Vilara's hair blazed like a silver sun, her own energy field pushing back against her sister's shadows. "You've seen only what you wanted to see," Vilara shot back. "I've lived among them. They're capable of incredible growth, of choosing their own path." A pounding sound from upstairs interrupted them, heavy boots on hardwood floors. The government agents had finally made their move. "Your human allies arrive right on schedule," Nixus smiled coldly. "They believe we'll help them acquire advanced technology. Such predictable creatures." Michael's mind raced. The crystal needed to reach the attic beacon, but both stairs were blocked. He looked around the basement, remembering every weird modification Vilara had made over the past weeks. There, behind the quantum stabilizer, the laundry chute. It connected all 4 floors. Vilara must have followed his gaze because she suddenly thrust both hands forward, creating a blinding flash. "Michael, run!" He sprinted for the laundry chute as chaos erupted. Behind him, he heard Nixus snarl in their alien language, followed by the sound of reality itself being torn apart. The basement door burst open, armed figures in black tactical gear pouring down the stairs. "Halt! Federal agents!" Michael yanked open the chute access and dove in headfirst, grateful now for Vilara's improvements that had somehow made the narrow passage wider on the inside than the outside. He emerged in the second-floor hallway just as the house's foundations shook with otherworldly energy. Clutching the crystal, he ran for the attic access. A figure stepped out of his bedroom, an agent who'd come up the back stairs, raising what looked like a high-tech weapon. "Don't move." But at that moment, one of Valara's security systems activated. The hallway carpet suddenly rippled, wrapping around the agent's legs like a python. Michael didn't wait to see more. He pulled down the attic stairs and climbed. The beacon was easy to spot, a crystalline spire rising from the floorboards, pulsing with soft blue light. But as Michael approached it, a section of the roof simply vanished. Nixus floated through the opening, her black hair writhing like angry snakes. "The data crystal. Now." Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Give it to me, and you might survive the experimentation phase of our intervention." "Michael, don't." Valara's voice called from below, followed by sounds of struggle. "Earth's freedom depends on it." He looked between the beacon and Nixus, feeling the crystal grow warmer in his hand. Below, he could hear Federal agents shouting, Valara fighting what sounded like a losing battle. In moments, they would all reach the attic. The choice crystallized in his mind. Michael Anderson, ordinary software engineer, mundane homeowner, reluctant host to an alien anthropologist, made his decision. He raised the crystal high, its glow intensifying as it resonated with the beacon. Nixus lunged forward, darkness streaming from her hands, as Michael whispered the activation phrase Valara had taught him during their late-night conversations about the stars. The crystal blazed like a miniature nova as Michael spoke the alien words. The beacon responded instantly, its blue light expanding to fill the attic. Nixus's darkness shattered against it like waves against a cliff. "No," she snarled, but her voice seemed distant, as if coming from across a vast space. The beacon's light intensified, and suddenly the attic wasn't just an attic anymore. The walls fell away to reveal what looked like a corridor of stars. Valara burst through the attic floor, her silver hair streaming behind her like a comet's tail. She looked battered but triumphant. "The retrieval sequence is starting. The Council will have to acknowledge my findings now." Multiple figures began materializing in the star corridor, tall, elegant beings with varying shades of luminescent hair. They moved with the same otherworldly grace as Valara, their eyes shining with different metallic hues. "Research Team Epsilon acknowledges the emergency signal," announced one with copper-colored eyes. "By the authority of the Science Council, we are initiating immediate extraction." Nixus backed away, her darkness dimming. "You overstep your authority. The Military Council has no jurisdiction here," another being interrupted, this one with eyes like polished bronze. "The data has been transmitted and verified. Earth's development must remain uninterrupted." The Federal agents who had finally reached the attic stood frozen, their weapons hanging uselessly at their sides as they stared at the impossible scene before them. The beings from the star corridor raised their hands in unison, and a soft golden light washed over the humans. "They won't remember the exact details," Valara explained to Michael. "Just a gas leak story that their superiors will confirm. No one needs to be harmed." Nixus glowered but couldn't resist as two of the beings escorted her into the corridor. "This isn't over, little sister. The Council will debate this for cycles to come." "Good," Valara smiled. "Debate is better than intervention." The copper-eyed being turned to Michael. "You've shown remarkable courage and adaptability, Michael Anderson. These qualities validate Valara's research about human potential." Michael looked around at his transformed attic, at the corridor of stars that seemed to stretch into infinity. "What happens now?" "Now," Valara said softly, "you have a choice." She held out her hand. "My team could use someone with your perspective. There's so much more to see, so many worlds where your skills could make a difference. Or..." She gestured to the golden light still washing over the agents, "You could forget all this. Live a normal life." Michael thought about his ordinary existence before Valara had turned it upside down. The quiet house, the predictable routine, the world that made perfect sense. Then he thought about quantum-enhanced debugging, breakfast conversations about parallel dimensions, and the way she'd shown him that reality was far more wonderful and strange than he'd ever imagined. He reached out and took her hand. The retrieval team began their final preparations. As the star corridor pulsed with transport energy, Michael looked back one last time at his house, at the normal life he was leaving behind. The mortgage was a bit steep anyway, he said with a smile. Villara laughed, the sound like chimes in a cosmic wind. Wait until you see the housing market in the Centauri system. Hand in hand, they stepped into the corridor of stars. Behind them, the attic returned to normal, the beacon dissolving into ordinary dust motes dancing in mundane sunlight. The federal agents would wake up outside, paperwork already filed about a minor gas leak investigation. But far above, if anyone had been watching the night sky with the right kind of eyes, they might have seen a brief flicker of silver light streak across the stars, a new observer joining the ranks of those who watched, learned, and wondered about the vast possibilities that existed in the spaces between ordinary things.